Hello. Today we're taking a look at a new type of item that I've designed called Spellbound Regalia. I had help from Delioth, or Braden, as you may recognize from Eldritch Osiris games, in the design of the systems for Regalia, which we will get into shortly. But let's go ahead and start reading what they're about, and I'll talk about what we've got here to show off, as well as a few different design points and ideas, and how I think these can be really cool in a lot of different ways. Spellbound Regalia is what they're officially called, and they're basically mage weapons. Spellbinders tend to eschew more martial pursuits in favor of their mystical training. However, along their path, they very often find means to imbue implements with special enhancements made to channel their magical powers, or by utilizing materials that do so naturally. Spellbound Regalia are choice items for spellcasters, weaving pathways of magic without the strain many of their normal magics might have on them. Armaments with the Regalia trait may need to be charged to use some of their activations, which have the charge trait. And with that, we get into our two new traits here, which are Regalia and Charged. Regalia. Items with the Regalia trait function similarly to specific magic weapons, with a few exceptions. Regalia can be etched with weapon potency and striking runes, which affect their strike activations as though they were weapon attacks. A Regalia strike activation can be used any time you could strike normally. Uses your spell attack modifier proficiency instead of proficiency in a particular type of weapon. Counts as both a strike and a spell attack when triggering reactions, and may have additional listed traits and effects in their entry. Unless otherwise stated, no attribute modifiers are added to damage from a Regalia's strikes, though they still benefit from bonuses to damage that normally affect weapon attacks, such as weapon specialization. Charged. Actions and activities with the charge trait require the item, creature, hazard, or other source associated with them to be charged. Unless otherwise stated, charging such a source can be done as an action with the manipulate trait, or with the manipulate and concentrate traits. Though some abilities and activations may also charge the source, if an action or ability specifies that a charge source becomes discharged, its charge is depleted and must be charged again before actions and activities with the charge trait can be performed. So, all in all, basically these are mage weapons. They aren't very effective in the hands of martials unless those martials are also casters. And like a fighter is never going to be good at us with a Regalia as they will with a weapon. Unless that Regalia also happens to be a weapon. But generally, when a Regalia is charged, it does not function normally as a weapon. So we've got a few to look at today. Little sneak peek, there's some down here too. But we will start with the Introspectum. And yes, I know they're not in a very good order. But we will begin with Introspectum. Oh, I forgot how I zoomed that on the screen. Whoops. So the Introspectum is a small journal embedded with a simple semi-precious stone. The corners of the book are capped in brass, and each one is associated with a skill that can be used to recall knowledge, chosen when it's created, such as Arcana, crafting, society, etc. You can spend 1 minute perusing your Introspectum to make a recall knowledge check with its associated skill with a +1 item bonus. Its strike activation is pretty simple. It deals 1d4 bludgeoning and has a range increment of 10 feet. It does have the charge trait, as all of them will, for its standard strike, which requires you to have spent an action ahead of time to have this trade-off. But that's not the only thing that you get to use it for when it's charged. Instance here, the second activation, Pertinent Info, is a free action with the charged and mental traits. Trigger, you successfully hit a creature with your Introspectum. Effect, the Introspectum's gemstone resonates with the creature and your mind. Until the end of your next turn, you gain a +1 item bonus to recall knowledge checks to identify the triggering creature. If you use the associated skill of the Introspectum, you also gain a +1 circumstance bonus to the check, and you discharge. So As you hit something, and then you discharge your book, and it gives you a benefit to figuring out what you're dealing with. Maybe figure out some of its weaknesses or something like that. And it's just a very simple one. And most of these are low level because they have some good abilities that scale over time or don't necessarily need scaling. Because you'll find that if there is something that uses a DC, it uses your spellcasting DC most generally. Although there are exceptions. So our second one is the Bottomless Bag of Bombs. It's a 3rd level item and costs 60 gold pieces. It's worn instead of held, like the Introspectum was, but does specify that you need a free hand to charge it. So this sturdy leather satchel bears scorch marks and a strangely unfitting floral pattern. Charging the bag always requires a free hand, as doing so has you pull a small fuzzy ball from the bag, which is a bomb. Dropping or otherwise losing your grip on the bomb discharges the bag. And skipping Boom Boom for right now, we have our strike activation, which has a range increment of 20 feet. The charged and fire traits is ranged as 1d8 fire damage plus 1 fire splash damage to the target and adjacent creatures per weapon damage die. And the basic strike here discharges the entirety of the Regalia. It's ranged, relatively high damage, and has splash. So those are all things that run into it being discharged. Plus it's thematic. You pull a bomb out, you throw it, you don't still have the bomb in your hand. Boom Boom is some action efficiency. It requires it to already be charged, so you have a bomb in your hand already. You strike with the bag's bomb, then interact to draw another bomb, charging the bag, then strike with the bomb, which discharges the bag. So it lets you sort of fire a little faster, if you will. And then you have the Uh-Oh activation, which is always available while you're wearing the Bottomless Bag of Bombs. Trigger is you take fire damage even if it's reduced to 0, and the effect is the bag detonates, dealing 1 fire splash damage to you and all adjacent creatures per weapon damage die of the Bottomless Bag of Bombs. If the bag was charged, double the splash damage and discharge the bag. So you can choose, instead of throwing a bomb, you can just detonate the bomb in your hand if you would take some fire damage. Next, we have the Daedalus Fist, which is split between the 2 pages. It's 20 gold, and its usage is worn gloves, very much like hand wraps of Mighty Blows. These sea green leather wraps always seem a bit damp and smell like the ocean breeze. When charged, bands of clear water wrap around your hands, adding momentum to your attacks, but making it difficult to use and manipulate other items. You suffer a -2 circumstance penalty to any checks that require the use of held items or the fine motion of your hands while charged. If you cast a spell with the water trait, you can charge the Daedalus Fist as a reaction. This is another potential facet of these designs, is where they synergize with your spellcasting, and you can activate them, or you can charge them as a tail end of casting a spell. And so we have our first activation here, Sea Hands, which is concentrate, manipulate, and water. So this does not require it to be charged. In fact, it is a way to charge the Daedalus Fist. You surround your arms in a protective flow of elemental water and charge the Daedalus Fist. While the fist remains charged, if you would take fire damage, you may spend a reaction to reduce any fire damage you would take by your level, and then you discharge it. So it basically gives you a special shield against fire damage specifically, a single instance of fire resistance. And then we get to its strike, which is agile, charged, free hand, and water. It's a melee strike and deals 1d6 bludgeoning damage. Pretty simple, basically similar to a Monk's Fist, except you're not adding strength, but you do get to use your spellcaster mod to hit. And you can still hold things, you can still, and it does have the water trait, which in some niche situations is going to deal some extra damage. And then you have the Tsunami Strike, which is a single action and requires it to be charged. And you use all the power in the water surrounding your fists. Strike with the Deadless Fist. This attack gains the Forceful trait, which means if it's a follow-up attack, not just your first attack, you get a little extra damage. And on a success, the target must also succeed a Fortitude save against your spell DC or fall prone, regardless of the result of the attack, discharge. So even if you miss, you discharge. And you'll see a couple of variations on this. This one is regardless of if you miss, you discharge. And you'll see in Shining Dart, which is the next one, that we have a discharge on critical misses. So let's move on to Shining Dart. It's the second level item. It's 35 gold pieces, and it's held in one hand. With a bulk of 1, it's a little beefy. So this rod of ash, capped with ornate silver embellishments, houses a pristinely clear crystal quartz crystal at one end with a tiny mote of dim light within. When etched with potency runes, the Shining Dart strike deal an additional amount of force damage equal to the item bonus to attack rolls granted by the rune. Additionally, any effect that would stop or reduce damage from Force Barrage affects the strike and homing dart activations. Shining Dart can only be charged via Let There Be Light, so you can't use your basic Concentrate, Manipulate activity or action to charge Shining Dart. It can only be charged specifically by Let There Be Light, and there is a reason for that, which we'll get into shortly. But basically, its attacks are treated as bolts from Force Barrage for effects that would defend against them, such as Shield, or there's the brooch item that absorbs magic missiles. So that is something to take note of. So since it's important, let's start with Let There Be Light. It's one action, Concentrate, Light, and Magical. I probably didn't need to add Magical. This was the first one I made. I was a little zealous with the traits. So you charge the rod and produce a tiny mote of light from the crystal that sheds bright light in a 10-foot emanation and dim light a further 10 feet. This is physically tiny, which matters for it, one, being an emanation, and for when you move it later. This mote moves with you until it is directed with another activation. You may only have one mote in existence at a time, and the mote ceases existing if the Shining Dart becomes discharged. So, basically, you've got this little light that follows you around. It's kind of like casting the light spell. But with this activation down here, Yonder Glow, you can redirect it. You can make it move around, and even attach to creatures. So, let's go ahead and sort of make our way up from the bottom here. So we have Yonder Glow, which is one action, requires us to be charged, and has the Concentrate trait. The requirements are your mote is within 30 feet, and you direct the mote to another space within 30 feet. If there's a creature you can see within the space, you may attempt a spell attack roll against their AC. Succeeding attaches the mote to the creature, causing it to follow them anywhere they go until they escape against your spell DC, or the mote ceases to exist. If the creature successfully escapes the mote, Shining Dart becomes discharged. You automatically succeed the spell attack roll against willing creatures. So you can attach it to your buddy, no problems. An enemy creature, they could dodge out of the way and not stick. We've got our Strike, which is charged, Concentrate, Force, and Light, Manipulate, and has a range of 30 feet. The reason for these is you are mentally commanding it, Concentrate. You are sort of pointing the rod to direct it, which is Manipulate. It, of course, needs to be charged. It is a light effect. It deals force damage, so force, and it has a total range of 30 feet. This one is not one that has increments. It deals 1d4 force damage. Now, if you have +1 on it, it also deals an additional force damage. Excuse me. It also deals an additional force damage. The mote flies up to your target, illuminating the area around them briefly, and you may target a creature that your mote is attached to instead of its normal range. And even if you do not have line of effect or sight to them, you still suffer any effects or penalties of being unable to see them as normal, such as a mischance for them being hidden. And on a critical failure, you discharge. So if you hit or you miss, it's fine, the mote sticks around, but if you critically miss, the mote explodes. Shatters apart. We've already gone over Let There Be Light. So let's look at Homing Dart, which is 2 actions: Charged, Concentrate, Force, Light, and Manipulate. And the requirements are your mote is within 30 feet or is attached to a creature. Effect: you send your mote hurtling at a creature within 30 feet or at a creature to which the mote is attached. They take force damage equal to that dealt by a successful strike activation. Shining Dart is then discharged. This is basically like a action-heavy version of a single magic missile or force barrage dart. But you can do it all day. So it's not very powerful in terms of action economy, but it's still good because it's a guaranteed hit. It's not going to crit. It's never going to crit doing this, but it's decent. It's chip damage. If you are especially just kind of screwed over by the current situation, if you can't hit a thing, this is very useful. And then we have the Brighter activation, which is 1 action, charged and light. The requirements: your mote is within 30 feet. And the effect is your mote surges with light for 1 minute, shedding light as a torch and increasing its counteract rank to half your level, rounded up. And using your spell DC as the counteract DC. This is basically changing this into a light cantrip. And at the end of this minute, Shining Dart becomes discharged unless it is already discharged another way. So basically, you can discharge it via Homing Dart or critically missing, or after 1 minute, it will discharge on its own. So a lot of that's to try and keep it from just completely overlapping with the light spell at earlier levels. But this is sort of this is inspired by the magic missile item from Terraria. The bottomless bag of bombs is inspired by the character Klee from Genshin Impact. The Daedalus Fist is also partially inspired by Genshin Impact and Avatar. But these were all ones that I had already made previous to making this video. But the same day that this video is made, I wrote the Saint's Cabicon and the Blood Thief Atham. So let's take a look at them. The Saint's Cabicon is an adjustment. So you might not remember or know what adjustments are. They are items that are basically attached to other items. And so they are built into either staves, wands, or holy symbols. They have a price of 35 gold pieces that modify that staff, wand, or holy symbol. This Cabicon comes in several varieties, chosen when it is crafted: Topaz, Onyx, or Amethyst. Topaz Cabicons add the holy trait to their strike, and Onyx adds unholy. Both Topaz and Onyx Saints Cabicons are uncommon unless you are part of a faith that allows for holy or unholy sanctification, respectively. You must be holding the item the Cabicon is applied to in order to activate it. And this one, I'm thinking, might not need the adjustment trait because I think adjustments are actually done at crafting, and I wanted this to be attachable. So it might have been better to have it just be usage attached to a staff wand or affixed to a staff wand or holy symbol. But I'll look into that more later. So basically, this Cabicon gives you 3 activations. You've got your strike, your guarding presentation, and saint's empowerment. So guarding presentation is a 2-action, concentrate and manipulate. You present the Cabicon before you strongly, ablating you to those who would cause you harm. You charge the Saint's Cabicon and gain a +1 circumstance bonus to saves. Oh, it's supposed to say saves and AC, but there's some redundancy here. Saves, saving throws, and AC against spirits and undead until the beginning of your next turn. If you have a Topaz or Onyx Cabicon, the bonus instead applies to unholy and holy creatures respectively. For 1 minute or until the Cabicon is discharged, whichever comes first, guarding presentation only costs 1 action. So this is a special charging, and it gives you a time period in which you can continually defend yourself a little bit against certain types of enemies. The Amethyst version is across the board spirits and undead, regardless of their sanctification, whereas the Topaz and Onyx variations are mostly focused on holy and unholy, but don't care whether it's undead or spirits or fiends or just people, so that it could work against a champion, for example. You have Saint's Empowerment, which is charged and spell shape. If your next action is to cast a spell that restores hit points to a creature, select 1 affected creature per weapon damage die of the Saint's Cabicon. The first time the selected creature regains hit points from that spell, they gain additional hit points equal to the spell's rank. Just a little bit of extra healing for you. And it does apply to undead. So if you've got an Onyx on there, if you got a Staff of Necromancy and you're trying to heal an undead with harm or something, go right ahead. You can do it. Its strike activation is pretty simple. It's charged, spirit, and has a range increment of 10 feet, and just does 1d6 spirit damage. Of course, the Topaz version is holy, and the Onyx version is unholy. So it does those in the appropriate damage types and triggering weaknesses and such. And then we have the Blood Thief Atham, our first high level one. And so it's magical regalia, it's 1,000 gold, and it is held in one hand. This one is also just a normal weapon. It's a +1 striking wounding dagger. And it does function normally as a weapon when not charged. However, when charged, it takes on a hunger that only magic can guide, with its blade becoming a liquid razor of blood that draws on even more. Drawing the blood from a Blood Thief Atham discharges it, usually in interact action. You have your strike activation, which is agile, charged, and versatile P. It does not let you throw it while it's charged. I mean, you can throw it, but it's improvised at that point. And you're just gonna bonk somebody on the head. But its main damage is persistent bleed damage. So this is gonna be overriding the wounding rune because it's just higher damage. Instead of 1d6, you'll be doing base 2d8. I know it says 1d8, but that's how weapons are formatted. We have striking, so this becomes 2d8 persistent bleed damage. Potentially plus, your weapon specialization, so there's a little extra on there as well. But remember, you don't get strength, you don't get dex, you don't get anything else to damage here. From your attributes. You're not getting your intelligence as a wizard or your charisma as a sorcerer. We've got 2 reactions and a 2-action activation. So we have the Supping Blade, which does not require it to be charged. And that's because it is a charging ability. Trigger is the Blood Thief Atham deals damage to a creature susceptible to bleed damage. And the effect is charge the Blood Thief Atham. And then you have Supping Siphon, which is a reaction, requires it to be charged, and you deal damage to a creature suffering persistent bleed damage. The effect is the creature immediately suffers the persistent bleed damage without a recovery check and then discharges. So this is, you've already got it active, you hit them, they're bleeding already, and you just suck blood out of them immediately into the atham, sating it momentarily. And then you have Unexpected Crystallization, a 2 action. You make a strike with the Blood Thief Atham. Instead of its normal damage, it deals persistent piercing damage as the blood of the blade crystallizes and spreads through the target's body, which then discharges, and you have just your normal knife again. That's all I've got for you today. Let me know if you like the idea of Spellbound Regalia, if you've got anything that this has inspired you to make, and check out my links down below. I have a bunch of free stuff on my Patreon. Nothing's behind a paywall. I really appreciate anybody coming and following. I appreciate any likes, comments, subscribes, all that stuff. You can also check me out on Twitch. I stream 5 days a week, most weeks. And I go over stuff like this, and I body double just other projects I'm working on. So let me know what you think, and I'll see you later. Peace.